Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be with you. The Prophet ﷺ was living in Medina with his companions, and as we said, they were trying to settle and to organize life within the city, but also with all the different tribes and even the nations around them, because they had now started being in touch with people connected to the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. So this is what happened during this time. Yet not everything was settled, and from time to time the Prophet ﷺ, through intelligence, was to hear that people were trying to organize things. And once he heard that one very important tribe, Al-Hawazin, were now starting to prepare to attack the Muslims, because this was a regional power and they want to challenge the very presence of the Prophet ﷺ. So he heard that 20,000 men were coming east from Mecca, from Medina. So he decided to go to prepare for it and to resist and to try to find a way to ultimately get what was the purpose and the objective, is to settle in the region and to have the community free and open to the world to be able to spread the message. So he started to prepare, because this was very serious, as they were to deal with the Hawazin. So he prepared, and he had 12,000 people. This was the most important army he was able to gather during all this time, to the point that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu was so happy, and he manifested his joy with the number. It was quite obvious for him that they were going to win. So they went, and in fact they were facing a leader who was quite smart, Malik. And Malik was smart, and he organized a trap for the Muslims. And when they arrived, it worked for a while. So when the Muslims and the people from Medina, and by the way also people now coming from everywhere, all the allies of the Prophet ﷺ were entering and facing the army, they were caught in a trap, to the point that they were completely lost, and the Prophet ﷺ was able to retreat and to call, Ya Ashab al-Bay'ah, and the people understood that something was happened, that they had to come too close to him. So they said, Labbaik, Labbaik, so we are here we are. And they came surrounding the Prophet ﷺ. They were able to retreat, and then after this, it was for them, they were able to win ultimately. But it was difficult, and it was a sign that yes, now you are a regional power, but you still have to be very, very cautious, because anything could happen. And the Quran is reminding us of this battle, and even of this tendency to be so proud and so sure that now we are a power, a regional power, that they are going to win anyway. And this was not what the message was sending to the Prophet ﷺ. What we find in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد نصركم الله في مواطن كثيرة ويوم حنين إذ أعجبتكم كثرتكم فلم تغن عنكم شيئا وضاقت عليكم الأرض بما رحبت وليتم مدبرين. So what is said here is, God has given you victory in numerous regions, but on the day of Hunayn, because this was the battle, your great number impressed you, but it availed of you nothing. And the land, as spacious as it was, narrowed for you, and you turn your backs in retreat. So you have to retreat, and this is what happened. And just to send a message to the Muslims that at the end of the day, whatever power you have on earth, you have to rely on God, and you need to understand that humility in everything is the way forward. And the verse continue, ثم أنزل الله سكينته على رسوله وعلى المؤمنين وأنزل جنودا لم تروها وعذب الذين كفروا وذلك جزاء الكافرين. Then Allah sent down His serenity, His peace, His tranquility upon His messenger and upon the believers. And He sent out troops you did not see. And He punished those who were the negator. Such is the recompense of the negator. So this was an important victory, because this was maybe the last where the Prophet ﷺ was to win and to send again a message to all the surrounding nations and tribes that now it will be difficult to defeat the Muslims. What happened with the community afterward and the companions is that the Prophet ﷺ had to distribute the spoils of war. And what he did is he gave more to Ahl Quraysh, for the people of Mecca. And at the end this upset the people of Medina. The Ansar say, now that he is with them, he is privileging them in distributing the spoils. So they were very upset. And the Prophet ﷺ understood this. He heard what they were saying, and he told them, look, they are going to go back with camels and money and riches, but you are going to go back home with me. So I'm choosing you, and you need to understand what is the best for you. Are you just connected and still seduced by the wealth of this world, or do you understand the very meaning of my choice? Because their faith is still fragile. Some of them just converted to Islam after 20 years of rejecting Islam, and he knew that in order to help them to settle, to get the message, he had to help them. And he said to the Ansar, should all the people take one path and the Ansar take another, I would be Ansar and I would follow the Ansar's path. Meaning, I'm one of you now, so I'm not privileging them. It's not a question of blood, it's not a question of kin, it's a question of the spiritual link. I'm coming back home with you. My home now is Medina. When he came back to Medina, and by the way, this is before moving on, we need to think about this, because out of this exile, it's very difficult to leave your roots. And this is what happened to so many people around the world. But that's not the end of the story. The Prophet ﷺ made it clear for all the people. Al-Madinah al-Munawwara is Madinat al-Rasul. This is home for him now. So it's a decision. You don't only belong to the land you were born in, or that's not always the case. You have also to think of building and creating an environment, and you can have a new home. And this is what happened to the Prophet ﷺ. So make it home wherever you are. Don't have your heart there and your body here. Just reunite, harmonize the reality, and have both there. And this is what he was sending, not even, by the way, to the Ahl al-Madinah, but also to Ahl Quraysh. When he came back to Medina, somebody came to him and he was told that somebody wanted to see him. And somebody came to see him and asked him, what if the poet Ka'b ibn Dhuhair was to come to see you? And the Prophet ﷺ knew Ka'b, and he knew how tough he was with his poetry against the Prophet ﷺ, insulting and mocking him. And he said, what if he would come to you and convert to Islam? Would you accept him? So the Prophet ﷺ said, of course I would. So he said, I am Ka'b. So the Prophet ﷺ was so happy. When the companions recognized him, they wanted to kill him. So the Prophet ﷺ stopped them, and he let Ka'b come close to him, and they started to talk. And at one point, Ka'b started reciting poetry. Yesterday he was using poetry as a weapon against the Prophet ﷺ. Now he was praising the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ was so moved that he took his garment and covered Ka'b with it, showing not only that he accepted him, but he was respecting him, and sending again a message to the Muslims. When it comes to beauty, just listen and accept beauty. So all the Muslims today who are saying, oh, poetry, it's not Islamic, and cultures, and it's not, these are not things that are Islamic, they don't get that, because the Prophet ﷺ was very sensitive, and he liked this, and he liked beauty, relying on what he said, Inna Allahu Jamilun Yuhibbul Jamal. God is beautiful and he likes beauty, and we have to promote beauty in whatever way, through poetry, through literature, through our relationship to nature. After this, he heard that in Taboo, the Byzantine Empire was preparing to attack the Muslims, and this was serious again. So he got his people ready. They went to Taboo. They stayed for 20 years and nothing happened. During this time, he was also able, while he was there, to set agreements with Jewish tribes and Christian tribes, saying that in fact they were under the protection of the Muslims. And this is again the question of al-jizya, which is a collective military tax. You pay it as long as you are not involved in the army and we are protecting you. And the Muslims, this is the way they understood it. Omar later, when he was unable to protect the Jewish tribes and the Christian tribes, gave them back al-jizya, because say, I cannot stick to the principles and all the terms of our agreement. This very year, when the Prophet ﷺ came back to Medina, the 9th year of al-Hijrah is known as the year of the delegations. So many delegations were coming from everywhere to recognize, acknowledge the power of the Prophet ﷺ and his community, and trying to get agreements of protection, peaceful coexistence. And this was the reality that he was now facing. If yesterday he was in exile, now the people were coming to him and trying to get his acknowledgement, his recognition, and this is where he was now dealing with his environment in a new way. At the very moment where the delegations were coming, some were trying to negotiate, we'll take from your Islam few things, and he was avoiding two things. There is no space for syncretism. You take Islam or you don't take. If you take it, it should be absolute. If you don't, that's your choice. You pay the jizya, we protect you. So he was not imposing religion, but he was not playing with religion. You have to take a decision on in this. And when he then decided to deal with all these tribes, this was based on these two principles. In the same year, Hajj was coming, so he didn't want to attend this year, so he sent Abu Bakr as-Siddiq leading al-Hajj for this year. And while they were on their way, he got a dream, a revelation, rather. It was a revelation telling him that now when you go to Mecca, now the space around the Kaaba, it's a sacred space and it should be devoted only for Muslims. This was the principle, and it's still the principle that we have to rely on when it comes to Al-Kaaba and the sacred mosque. We find in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخش إلا الله فعسى أولئك أن يكونوا من المهتدين. إنما يعمر means the only people to attend God's places of worship are those who believe in God and the last day, and pray regularly and practice regular charity and fear none but God. These are most likely to be guided. So this is a verse which is important because it was understood at that time, of course, that the sacred place, Al-Haram, Al-Kaaba, around Al-Kaaba, it's only for Muslims. And this is what is said in this verse. Now, some interpreters and some scholars of Islam understood this as meaning that all the sacred places, all the mosques should be only devoted for Muslims. So this is why you see now differences when you travel around the world, that in some country you can visit some mosques and others you can't. Based on this difference of interpretation, the great majority of the Muslims are understanding that it's only Al-Kaaba, you can't go there, but all the other mosques are open to be visited and open for the non-Muslims to go in. So it's important because it's also related to Najran and the way the Prophet ﷺ welcomed them. So the Prophet ﷺ was dealing with Al-Hajj, was dealing with the Byzantine, was dealing with the world, and within his own family, as he married Maria, he got a son, and his son was Ibrahim. Ibrahim was his son, and he reached 1.5 years. And what happened again, the Prophet ﷺ had to deal with death. He lost his son. Remember that the Prophet ﷺ, while he was alive, he lost 3 of his daughters and 3 of his sons. So that's not easy way. That's not easy for a man. It's not easy for a father. The natural way is for you to leave before your kids. The Prophet ﷺ lost many companions, and within his family, 3 sons and 3 daughters. And when Ibrahim passed away, the Prophet ﷺ said the famous statement, the famous supplication, and he was so sad. He was crying, and even the companions were surprised to see the Prophet ﷺ in such a state. And he said, إِنَّ الْعَيْنَ تَدْمَعُ وَالْقَلْبَ يَحْزَنُ وَلَا نَقُولُ إِلَّا مَا يَرْضَى رَبُّنَا وَإِنَّا بِفِرَاقِكَ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ لَمَحْزُونُونَ. The eye shed tears, O Ibrahim, the heart is infinitely sad, and one must only utter what satisfies God. With your departure, Ibrahim, we are so sad. So this is the way the Prophet ﷺ was again just experiencing suffering and showing this, exposing this to all the people around him. With, of course, he was very shy as to his emotions, but sometimes it was too much. This is Ar-Rahmah, Rahmat Ar-Ruhama. It's the mercy of the merciful that we need sometimes to express as something which is part of ourselves. And during this, what happened, it was an eclipse of the sun happened at the same time. So the Muslims say, oh, this is a miracle, there is something happening. So the Prophet ﷺ just reacted to this, telling them, sun and moon are 2 signs of God. Their light never darkened for anyone's death. Stop superstition. This has nothing to do with the death of my son. So once again, for us, even in our times, now we have Muslims just looking for signs, and they are very creative, by the way, to see signs where there are no signs, and to create connections to the point that you say, okay, this is too much. It's between paranoia and superstition. That we need here to understand how the Prophet ﷺ was wise, telling them, no, it has nothing to do with this. Just my son passed away, and this is nature. I am a human being like you are. When they come back from Hunayn, the Prophet ﷺ said, and this statement is disputed because it's not an authentic hadith according to the great majority of the scholars, when he said, we are coming from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad. And one of the companions asked, what is the greater jihad? He said, it's jihad in nafs. It's the fight, the struggle against your own ego. So the Sufi traditions are always quoting this hadith, and others, the more Salafi literalists and the people who are relying on the authenticity of the hadith are saying, no, this is not a right one. It may not be true as to the chain of transmission, but the meaning is true, that we need to get this. It's very, very difficult to die in the path, in the way of God, but it's much more difficult to live in the way of God and to struggle with our own ego. It could be our biggest enemy on earth. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ is. Your intimate struggle to be a good person, a good human being, is to be understood at the greatest jihad. When he was in Medina, he came back. He got a revelation. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. When there comes God's victory and conquest, and you see the people entering in God's religion in multitudes, in numbers, then celebrate the praise of your Lord and seek His forgiveness. He is the acceptor of repentance. Look, what we are witnessing now and what we understand, it's exactly the time where all these people were coming to Him. And the revelation, God is telling him, as much as they are coming to you, you should be prepared to depart. Your time is coming. It's the announcement that your mission is close to its end, and you have to be prepared to this. And again, you know, the feeling that, yes, now it's the time, now we are winning, should be understood as this is the last stage. Now you have to prepare, and this was the 10th year of Hijrah. They were settled, everything was fine, and this is also what he understood. He said to Fatima that this would be his last year, and he said also a story to Fatima. Every year the angel Gabriel was to come and to recite to him the Quran once and ask him to recite it to him. So the Prophet ﷺ was used to recite the Quran, the whole Quran, every Ramadan. But this year, the Jibreel alayhi salam recited it twice. So this was a sign that the Prophet ﷺ was going to leave, something was going to happen. This was the message that he got, that now you should be prepared to leave. So this was the 10th year of Ramadan, and the Prophet ﷺ decided for the first time and the only time to go to the pilgrimage. So he went to the pilgrimage for the first time, and it was in fact the only pillar of the 5 pillars of Islam which was not codified. The people didn't know exactly. So the Prophet ﷺ was to go there, and he told them, خُذُوا مِنِّي مَنَاسِكَكُمْ, take from me your rituals, just look at me and the way I'm going to deal with everything, all the rituals, and this will be the final pillar, and you will get this as part of your understanding of Islam. So he went there. It was with more than 140,000 men who came with him, and pilgrims going to Mecca, and they went, and this is where he performed all the rituals, and the people got the last elements, the last features dealing with the very essence of the pillars of Islam. So at that point, the pillars of Iman and the pillars of Islam, the 6 pillars of your faith and the 5 pillars of your religion were all set, understood, and conveyed and revealed to the people. So they were now able to deal with the principles, but also to understand al-mu'amalat, meaning the social affairs, how you have to deal with the surrounding environment. So this is the Prophet ﷺ coming to an end. His mission was close to its end. And this is where, during this pilgrimage, that he delivered the farewell pilgrimage, the farewell sermon that we now have as something which is essential to our understanding. In fact, he was summarizing for his people, but also for us, the very essence of our religion. And he said, we cannot just summarize what he said, but there are some principles and some notion that we have to get. First, he repeated, now you should get this as it is. only one God. So the essence, the centrality of Tawheed in your life. Connect to God, trust Him, rely on Him, and you should know that this is what is essential. And I am only a human being conveying the message. And he was asking his people, please acknowledge that I achieved the mission. And they testified, we bear witness that you did. So this is something which is essential. There is one God, I am but a messenger, a human being, and you have to acknowledge this. The second thing that he said is, now also you need to understand that this space is a sacred place, and you have to respect this sacred place. But as much as you have to respect the sacred place, you should know that your life and life in general is sacred as well. So you have to respect life as something which is an element of our understanding. If we are connected to God, we respect God because He is the creator of life. He is the creator of life around us. And based on this, our human brotherhood, we are brothers and sisters in humanity, and this also is sacred. And he said, there is an Arab is not superior to a non-Arab. You are not to be distinguished by your color or your social status. You are all from Adam. كلكم من Adam, and Adam min turab, and you are coming from dust. So be humble as to your origin. Be clear as to your equality. This is, again, something that we need to get, because it's very easy for Muslims today. You know what? In Islam we are all equal. Yes, in Islam we are not equal, but not among Muslims. That's the reality. There is a difference. There is a gap between the teachings that we have coming from Islam. And if we come back to this, it's not only to remember the beauty of this sermon. The content, the substance is much more important for us to understand, because it helps us to get the very meaning of Islam today. So once again, equality was an important message that he repeated. And this also is connected to things that he said, saying, now, it's not out of your social status. It's referring to the verse of the Quran, the best among you is the more righteous. That's important. Now, when it comes to equality, the best among you is the best for the people. It's not a question of, I'm with my people right or wrong. No, your people when they are right, and right with all the people, and the best among you, according to Al-Bayhaqi, is the best for the people. He also added in this sermon something which was important for the Arabs of his time and necessary for us today: be good and respect women. Respect women, because he was dealing with a patriarchal society. But as we are now dealing, this was the point where this message should be understood. He was talking to women, and he said to women and men, be good with your women. And what he said in another hadith, he said, the best among you is the best for and with his wife. Meaning here that it's the summary of the Islamic message that we need also to get today. And as a conclusion, he said that he left with us two things. If we hold to them, we are not going to be lost. And this is the revelation, Kitabullah, and Sunnat Rasulihi wa Sunnati, meaning my tradition. It's the compilation of all the ahadith, all what we know about it. What we are doing even here with the Sirah and his biography is for us to understand in which way we are following this, holding to the two principles, the Quran, not the principles, even the two references for us, the Quran and the prophetic tradition. He received the revelation after this, and it was, as we said, his only pilgrimage, the only pilgrimage he performed, helping the Muslims to understand what were the rituals. And he got the message, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. It's part of the verse. Today I have perfected your religion for you and have completed my favor upon you and have approved Islam as a religion for you. When he got this, what is said here is that's the end. This is the achievement. This is, your religion has been perfected. We need to get this in two ways. It's the end of the 23 years of revelation, but it's also the end of centuries of multiple revelations ending with you. So this is the perfect religion. And the perfect religion, it's not that we Muslims are perfect, but the teachings and the principles and the objectives are perfect. And God is saying, I favor, and this is my favor upon you. So my favor upon you is to give you this last message and requiring from you to be consistent with the principles. And as this is said through this history of human beings and the history of the Muslims after all what they went through was another signal. You are now close to leave your people. And it was another sign that he will soon depart. So through this story, this understanding, the farewell pilgrimage and this sermon, the Prophet ﷺ was summarizing what Islam is all about. He was talking and the people were repeating for the 140 and so people be able to listen to what he had to say. Today we read this and we read the sermon and we understand Islam. What is necessary and imperative in our relationship to him is to get this right, that this history is the history of a human being who came to deliver a message, and he told them, I don't know if I'm going to be with you next year. So he knew from God, you are coming to come back to the source, and he knew for the people, now it's time for you to go alone, without me, but with all the principles, without me, but with God, and with God means with me. Don't forget to tell the people you love that you love them. Life is fragile.